Oh, that is a pug. He looks like he's struggling. Winnie, you want to come see? Yeah, that's a fluffy one. Oh, Winnie's a thick girl, you know, and she needs all that space just for her. This is caffeine free, but I'm pretty sure it's full of sugar, so same difference, right? Hi kids, welcome back to another pizza party. I'm Mrs. Pizza. Winnie's back there, playing her role as cinematographer. And cheese, oh my gosh, can you believe it, is in the cheese spot. How groundbreaking, how original. And we are here today to do a recent reads. Why? Because if I wait too long, it's too many books and it's overwhelming. So I like to do this while it's a little bit short. I tend to get a little far behind on these, so I'm going to try my best to catch up. But also it's been raining all morning and the sun is finally starting to come out, so the amount of dogs that are walking by is honestly highly distracting. Let's see if the dogs and I can make it through this without constantly letting you know what dogs are walking by. That one looks just like Winnie. All right, let's talk about some books. The first book we're going to talk about is The Teller of Small Fortunes. This I picked up because it was touted as a somewhat cozy fantasy. I love a good cozy fantasy, and I ended up enjoying this one just fine. This is the story of Tao, and she is a traveling fortune teller of small fortunes. So she travels around from small village to tiny town in her wagon with her... Was it a donkey? I think it was a donkey that was pulling her wagon. Anyways, she sets up shop in these small towns, stays for a couple days. Using tea leaves, she will give people small fortunes. So she'll tell you if it's going to rain tomorrow or who you're going to kiss at the dance. But she's not going to give you big fortunes because Tao is trying to lay low and small fortunes keep her safe and help her pay the bills, basically. Not that she has bills, but she needs money. Everybody needs money to survive. On one of her journeys, she encounters two people who are looking for the lost daughter of one of them. These two men are on an adventure looking for one of their daughters, and she ends up getting wrapped up into this search for this small child. They find other people along the way as they travel across the countryside looking for this kid. I will say the one kind of complaint I had about this story was that it felt like, even though we are on a journey to find this child, it kind of just felt like a bunch of side quests. It felt like we were constantly getting sidetracked. And I know that's how stories usually work. We have our overarching story and our beats throughout, but we just stumbled upon the things that would help us move the larger story along while we just completed tiny side quests along the way. This is a simple, cozy, found family type adventure. Nothing too big and scary happens. Some people are keeping secrets. We learn about their history. Everyone is lovely. Our characters that might be finding romance along the way, but it's definitely not romance heavy, so don't let that scare you away. This is not much of a romance story, so much as some people are attracted to each other, because that's what happens when you get groups of people together. If you're looking for something sweet, cozy, and I felt a little on the slow moving side, this was definitely worth picking up. I ended up giving it 4 stars. It was fine. I was still feeling in my fantasy mood after that and decided to pick up something that's been sitting on my shelves for not too long, but long enough, and that was Between Two Fires. I have read 2 books by this author so far and really enjoyed them. So I went back and picked this one up, knowing that I enjoy how this author writes, but this is a standalone fantasy that is taking place in medieval France. So it's something different from what I've read from them before. Though I truly enjoyed this, I don't think this is going to be for everyone. This is the story of a knight who, through circumstances, has ended up with a band of mercenaries. He is not the best guy, and he's living in medieval France during the time of the Black Death. But concurrently to that, we also have a battle taking place between heaven and hell, between angels and demons, between the big bad and the big good. And so we have these big epic stakes that are taking place while we are also following this character. In the very beginning, he encounters a young girl who eventually ends up going on an adventure with him. They soon bring a priest into the fold, and these 3 characters travel across the countryside in medieval France, basically encountering some of the scariest, craziest you could encounter. This is dark. This is grim. This also felt very side questy, but in a good way. I actually enjoyed the way that our characters kept encountering things that hindered them from getting to their quest. There were lots of moments where you absolutely are going to get grossed out. Really sad things happen. Absolutely evil things come flying out of the mud, or demons with maggots falling. This is gross and dark and sad, and it's not going to be for everyone. This is very religion heavy. There's a lot of stakes put into these angels, these demons, what's going on behind the scenes, and these smaller players might have a place on the board of this game between these big bads and big goods. I really enjoyed this. There was really some lines in this that just like hit you in the chest, but again, this like grim, dark, religion-based fantasy in medieval France is not going to be for everyone. I needed something a little bit lighter after that, and so I decided to go back to a series that's always done good things for me, and that is the kind of fairy tale series by Cassandra Gannon. I picked up Seducing the Sheriff of Nottingham. In these stories, we are following the characters that you are familiar with from fairy tales or fables that you've read before as they are twisted and turned on their head. The world they live in is very similar to the world of Shrek 2, which I truly, truly enjoyed. There are magical fairy tale components, but also people have cell phones. It's very silly and over the top. In this story, we are kind of branching off into a new realm because we have mostly taken place in other realms at this point, but the story starts off in the same place. There is a prison that all of the bads have been sent to, and there is a big escape that happens at some point. We have our character who is Maid Marian, and she is actually in the beginning of the story imprisoned in this big super duper prison full of all the bads from your favorite fairy tales, when a friend of hers that she makes in prison gives her an opportunity to travel back in time. See, Marian has been put in prison for killing the sheriff of Nottingham. He was somebody that's always been present in her life and wasn't necessarily a good person. Well, I shouldn't say that. See, there's bads and there's goods in this world, and you're just either born bad or born good, but that doesn't actually necessarily mean that you're actually bad or actually good. See, the goods oftentimes turn out to be lousy humans, and the bads actually turn out to be pretty good people along the way, but they just kind of fall into these categories by happenstance. So Marian has killed a bad, and she's ended up in this big bad prison, and she now is traveling through time with all of the knowledge that she has from the years she's lived, but she's getting to do it all over. Her sole purpose is to make sure that the sheriff of Nottingham doesn't die this time around, because even though Marian was the one that went to prison for killing him, she didn't do it, and she doesn't really know who did. So between these two, we have this mystery of who's going to kill the sheriff of Nottingham. Now that Marian has this knowledge, she's obviously changed some things and is aware of some of the beats in the story, but things are going to be different this time around. She is much more free and open to being who she was, because before she was a maiden. She lived by the rules. She was very upstanding and slightly prudish, but now that she's been to prison and kind of thrown that all out the window, she's just here to be herself and do what she wants to do. Although I did enjoy this is not my favorite of the series. The Kingpin of Camelot still holds that title for me. This was okay. I think it kind of circled around itself a little too often. It was only taking place over the course of a week, and the highs and lows that characters were having felt like something that should have happened over more time, but yet stuff would happen and you'd go, oh yes, okay, I guess that makes sense because this is only 2 days later. So it went on too long. This should have been shorter. Some of this should have been left on the chopped off and left on the editing floor. But overall, it was a silly good time, and I enjoy this series as a whole. The next book I picked up after that is We Have Always Lived in the Castle. I thought I needed something short and gothic, and this is the classic I've never read before, something that I felt like it was borderline a sin that I hadn't picked up, and so I decided to pick this up from my library. I actually really ended up enjoying this, but it is a lot weirder than I anticipated. This is the story of Mary Catherine, or Meerkat, and she lives in the house just outside of town. She's always lived in this castle, this beautiful house that's been in her family for generations. They have a large piece of land. They are the wealthy and elite of this very small town. They are the big fish in this tiny little pond. In the opening of the story, Meerkat goes to town, and immediately you get the tension and the animosity that not only the town has for Meerkat, but the suspicions and bristliness that Meerkat has for the members of the town. Something has happened here and you don't know why or what it is. Meerkat has so many, I'm going to call them compulsions. You are in her point of view, and so you learn quickly that she is her own creature. She is the type of person that has her own way of thinking, her own way of wrapping her head around things. She will bury something in the sand as her own ritual to keep her and her house and her family safe. There are only 3 members of the family that still live in the castle, and you slowly learn why that is as well. This is basically how a family becomes an urban legend, as is how I will put it. Everyone sucks, except for Constance. I think she's the only person that isn't, well, Meerkat's fine, even though she's Meerkat. But it's a look at these people and how they become this like legend within this town, how this mob mentality takes over. It's gothic, it's weird, it's dark, we're learning lessons. I can definitely see why this is a classic. And I actually really enjoyed this, but I think I even more enjoyed like some of the imagery when you stand back, when things happen within the story and you stand back and think about the imagery that's being invoked in some of these parts of the story, how impactful it actually was. The next book I picked up after that was Only One Bed. This is a Christmas novella that I had completely forgotten about and just needed something short and quick to consume. I needed a romance. I wanted something snappy. So I picked this book up because this is obviously a forced proximity Christmas tale where there's going to be only one bed. So it's just like trope soup. They're just throwing tropes at you. And if you like those tropes, you pick it up and you eat the soup, you know? This is the story of Abby, and she needs to get away. And so she has gone to the secluded cabin of her friend/boss to spend the Christmas holiday all by herself. She's got all her supplies. She's got everything she could need to keep herself entertained. And she's headed off to this remote cabin solo. So when one night she gets a knock at the door, it is someone who is in distress. She lets them in and realizes quite quickly that it is someone who is her sworn enemy since childhood. You quickly get the reasons why these two people hate each other. I should say hate each other. And unfortunately, because he's injured and there's a blizzard outside, they're now stuck together in this tiny cabin with nothing but like each other and books to keep them company. They have to spend a lot of time together, and slowly the walls start crumbling. They start having conversations around the reasons why they dislike each other. Sparks fly. This was a book, and I think this really became clear when I read the acknowledgments, that this author went through something very hard right before they wrote this, and this book almost feels like a therapy session. It not in a bad way, but this was something that both characters in this story not only are incredible communicators, but also use different forms of art, whether that's writing or painting, what have you, to work through their own issues. It's their form of therapy, using this as an outlet. And obviously this author was using writing as an outlet. She says in the acknowledgments that basically she found out that her husband was cheating on her, and her marriage obviously dissolved after that. So she made these two characters who are perfect for each other, who've been through hard situations, who almost over communicate, who've been through all the therapy, who are using different forms of therapy to help themselves. It's a lot. Not necessarily in a bad way, but you can definitely tell that what the author was going through is coming through on the page, and I appreciate that. I mean, sometimes you got to use whatever kind of therapy you can have, but I will say it wasn't as light and fun of a story as I thought it was going to be. There's a lot of hard conversations that are happening in this, and honestly, I hope this author is okay, and I hope that awful cheating ex-husband of hers stubs his toe every morning. I hope there's always citrus in all of his paper cuts. You know what I'm saying? I ended up giving this book, I think, 3 stars. It just kind of felt like a lot heavier of a story when I was looking for a silly little Christmas romance. And the last book we're going to talk about is Grave Matter. I read this in a reading blog. I'll link it Over there, I believe, is where it pops up. This is the story of Sydney, and she has recently been accepted into a prestigious program on a remote island where she's going to study mushrooms. She has gotten a lot of attention and accolades for some former studies she did having to do with dark mushrooms, but the place she's going has some sort of medical research facility, and there's a very rare mushroom that only exists on this island in the Pacific Northwest with lots of fog and greenery, and everything's damp and dark and foggy, and the atmosphere was good times. As soon as Sydney shows up at this location, things immediately are off. People are acting suspicious. Everything is suspicious. Everybody is acting suspiciously. You almost immediately realize that something is going on this island. I will say it takes a little while to get into this story, and not necessarily because it's bad, but because there are spicy scenes that come out of nowhere. They are mostly dream sequences in the beginning, and so they start abruptly and stop abruptly, and they are incredibly spicy, and it was very jarring. It took me a while to get into the rhythm of that, but once I did, I actually had a really good time with this. The horror elements are something that really works for me. Creepy spores, creepy mushrooms, creepy plant life, absolutely terrifying to me. And we had a lot of damp, creepy, fungus-ridden horror, but also you could tell that our main character was mentally deteriorating, and so we're having hallucinations, or are we not having hallucinations? Did that happen? Did that not happen? So there's a lot of uncertainty around our main character as well. I actually ended up really enjoying this as I went along with it, and if you can just kind of get into the rhythm and just know that first little part, you're going to be kind of confused, but I believe that's by design, then you actually will probably enjoy this book. I had a good time with creepy horror, spicy times. I can tell that this author is also very affected by the kind of horror that I am affected by. They obviously watched The Last of Us or played the video game. They put a lot of research into mushrooms, and it shows, even though the science is most likely not sciencing, it feels like it is, and that's why I think this was really successful. But that, kids, is where we are going to end this recent reads. I am trying my best to catch up on these, and I feel like my reading is only getting more unhinged as time goes on. I've always been a moody mood reader, but the diversity in just the genres I am reading within is absolutely out there. I feel like I might be going bananas, but I'm enjoying the ride. If you had fun hanging out with me and the dogs, please subscribe. I hope you're reading good books out there wherever you are, and I'd love to hear about them. And I'll see you next time. Winnie, you are so passed out right now.